what a wonderful relationship our DAR has with this house, with Bellevue, and with the Austin Women's Club. The tracing that relationship makes a very interesting story.
Chateau Bellevue.
In the very beginning, the capital moved to Austin from Houston. This was just one big vast land here. But in 1873, this house was established, or at least it was purchased. It wasn't built and finished until 1874. The Norths built the house. After they married, they came to Austin, Texas, to establish a life. And they found this land that was magnificently placed and beautiful. It had Little Shoal Creek running at the foot of the property. It had a magnificent view of the Colorado River. The Norths, they had 7 children actually, 6 boys and 1 girl. The one girl, the one daughter, was a musician, and she went to school to study music in Europe and was in Germany for several years. And during that time, Mr. North built her music studio. It's a beautiful little studio cottage. And then further down the hill, Mr. North built another home, which was called Villa Bellevue. This they named Bellevue Place. Mr. North became ill, but he died shortly after. And so the house was for sale.
It was sold once to the Gaines family, who only owned it for about a year, until ownership transferred back to Catherine North. Ira Evans and his wife purchased the house in 1892 and began extensive remodeling.
And he came to Texas. Texas at that time was just opening up, and it was just vast country. And so he was sent to Texas, and he did a little bit of everything. He is a story unto himself. He was director of the bank, Austin National Bank, that was opened. He was Speaker of the House of Representatives at one point, the youngest member ever to be Speaker of the House of Representatives. He established Tillotson College. He and his wife hired Alfred Giles for the house, and they changed it completely.
He was a renowned architect in Central Texas, but he did not come from here originally. He was born in Middlesex, England in 1853. When the Evans bought the house, they needed to have extensive remodeling done. And by then, Giles was very well known in the Central Texas area.
Whereas the Norths had just a rectangle for a house, he came and just gave carte blanche to Alfred Giles to change everything.
And he loved local materials. He loved the old world charm.
Some of the most beautiful things in the world were put in this house. The moldings, the most beautiful chandeliers that are baccarat. It's an incredible thing to see that much baccarat hanging from a ceiling. You can see behind me this staircase. It is walnut and cherry and longleaf pine.
And of course, one of the treasures of Bellevue is the beautiful stained glass. Until recently, the identity of the artist who created these works of art had been a mystery. That is, until the man's great-grandson came to look at his ancestors' work in the home and identified the artist as Joseph E. Flanagan of the Flanagan and Biedenweg Company of Chicago, one of the largest glass manufacturers of the time. He produced a brochure from 1893 that included a testimonial from Major Ira H. Evans himself that proclaimed the star skylight the handsomest thing of the kind I have ever seen.
Ira Evans was a member of an SAR chapter up in Vermont because there was no SAR, no Sons of the American Revolution chapter here in Texas. So he and some friends met in Galveston in 1896, and they joined in the organization of the Texas Society of SAR. Some of the ladies in Washington petitioned the SAR for some kind of membership in their organization, but they were rebuffed, said no, it's just for men. So the ladies just formed their own organization, and in 1890 they formed the organization and they named it the Daughters of the American Revolution. And it was a very popular organization, and before long there were chapters in many states. And by 1900, there were 5 chapters in Texas, and one of them was here in Austin. The chapter was started by partially started by Mrs. Ira Evans. I guess her husband had encouraged her, and her name was Frances. And she and Florence Anderson Clark, who was a member of DAR from another state and whose husband was the provost and the librarian at the University of Texas, gathered together a group of ladies who were invited to this very room, to the parlor of Bellevue, and they had an organizational meeting in 1898. And the chapter was formed and was named Thankful Hubbard after Mrs. Clark's grandmother, who had 4 sons who fought in the American Revolution. The chapter got its charter in 1899. So Thankful Hubbard was one of the very first chapters in Texas. There were lots of women's clubs in Austin. There were lots of women's clubs all over the United States. And in Austin, it was getting pretty hard to find a place to meet. And by 1928, a group of ladies, club ladies, and individuals met together, and they formed a group called the Austin Women's Club. And they said, what we want to do is we want to build or buy a place, a clubhouse, where various clubs could have their meetings.
In 1929, the Austin Women's Club purchased the Evans estate for $36,000. And at that particular time, there were 28 clubs that participated in holding their meetings and being part of this woman's clubhouse.